Hi, everyone. I welcome you warmly. This is the first session of our first Land Purpose Forum. I'm very happy and excited to be here. My name is Renato Cymbalista. I am a professor in the School of Architecture and Urbanism of the University of São Paulo. I am also one of the directors of FICA, which is a progressive real estate fund that's happening since 2015 in São Paulo, Brazil. And I am replacing the first facilitator of our sessions, which that would be Ms. Leilane Farha, who unfortunately had to cancel her participation because she had COVID. And I'm very happy to be introducing this first session of the forum. For the ones who are curious about how this forum works, this is a series of 11 very relaxed conversations on different aspects of alternative property, different kinds of property, progressive property. How can we deal with land, housing, and property in general so that we uh, uh, support the building of the world of the society that we want. We divided the sessions of the forum in different aspects. This aspect that we are treating in this session is very much class based, addressing displacement. How can we carve out possible land models so that we keep people in the land, so that people don't need to be evicted? And we have three amazing specialists on these issues that will be introducing themselves. We plan to have um, we plan to have a 1 hour conversation, and Leilani Farha has just said that she is indeed here. So that despite COVID, she can come. That's really nice. That's really nice. I'm just checking the chat so that I'm introducing the forum itself, and then very soon Leilani is coming. Hi there. Welcome. Thank you so much
Hi.
for coming. Thank you so much. We were very sad that you said that you had a COVID issue in your family, but we are very happy that you're here.
I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So that I'm happy to give the word to you. Do you want to act as a facilitator of this session? No? Okay, you are just a participant, not just. You are an honorable participant. Okay, thank you so much. I'll keep the word as a facilitator. Second thing that I was just telling that soon each one of you will have the time to introduce yourself. And also, I want to introduce the methodology of this dialogue, of this forum. We were very insistent that every one of you did not have to prepare a PowerPoint presentation, one of these boring dozens of presentations that you've been preparing and representing over and over. This is not what's required here. What we've been saying, come with your intelligence, come with your experience, and let's have 1 hour of relaxed talk in which we open-minded talk about what haunts us, what inspires us, what things that we want to talk about is addressing displacement issue. And the methodology, which is a very nice methodology that's been carved out by New King Ko, who is the technological partner of this dialogue, is really low tech. It's like this. I'll just give you one example. When I want to talk something, I go to the center of the table and I catch the words. And then I talk whatever I want to talk, as long as I want to talk. When I'm ready, I give the word back to the center of the table, like this. You just put the. And then someone who is inspired or disturbed about the last talk or wants to talk something will catch the word again and talk. Enjoy it so that we are listening to each other in a more attentive way and also talking also in a more responsible and focused way. Okay? Does anyone have doubts concerning the methodology? Okay, great. So that now I'm delivering the word, and whoever wants to catch it and introduce him or herself, do it.
I'll do it. Seeing I was intended to facilitate this session, but couldn't gather my thoughts and get my schedule together in a way that would accommodate that, I should at least introduce myself at the beginning, break the ice. It's very lovely to be here. Nice to see you, Renato, Maria, Paula, Felician. I'm Leilani. I am currently the global director of a movement called The Shift that is focused on understanding that housing is fundamental to human dignity and to life itself, and that it is, in fact, a human right as it is found in international human rights treaties and constitutions and legislation around the world. And that as a human right, that means something. It's not only a rallying cry, although it is a rallying cry, but it means something. And so the shift is trying to use the human right to housing to hold governments accountable to what they've committed to. So that's the movement. I am the former UN Special Rapporteur on the right to housing, a position I held for 6 years, from 2014 until 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic. I finished April 2020. Lucky me. In any event, I'm really committed to this conversation, and I apologize for not being able to facilitate it. I have 2 people sick with COVID in my house, and it's just logistics are crazy, and who's going to sit where, and who's going to order the food, and all of that. So, this conversation is to me one of the main conversations we should be having. There's of course, and it's linked to the other ones, right? So we're having conversations about the pandemic, we're having conversations about climate change, and we must have conversations about displacement, housing, evictions, and how to keep housing affordable and address the housing crisis. And those 3 things are very interrelated, but I put them all at the same level as some of the most pressing concerns facing all of us. So, okay, that's a long introduction. I'll shut up now. Thank you.
Now,
So I'll wrap it. I'm Maria Hernandez. I'm from San Juan, Puerto Rico. I'm involved with the housing issues since 2005 when I started to volunteer with the Caño communities, Caño Martin Peña communities. They are very, very low income communities, and they started as informal settlements almost 100 years ago. They were located in a very, very special location here in Puerto Rico that by the time it has been, now they are encroached within the, like what we call the Golden Mile, which is the economic mile of Puerto Rico. Then I started to teach at the University of Puerto Rico, specifically the Economic Development Clinic, and continue help the Caño communities, which led me to help other communities here in Puerto Rico that also have title issues. Then when Hurricane Maria struck Puerto Rico, we knew that in Puerto Rico there was a lot of poverty, but after that, it was, like more visible, this whole thing about the title issues, because FEMA, which is the federal government of the United States, federal agency of the United States, they started, asking for titles for giving help to the people. So they were conditioning the help to a title, and the clinic started helping those people with most pressing needs about what title issues was. There are a lot of communities living on the coast, and they have also an issue with climate change and the rising levels of the sea. So they are getting displaced because of the money of Maria. they are being displaced. There's a whole of things, very, very complicated matter here in Puerto Rico about housing. So I, as long as I continue with the clinic and as a lawyer, helping the people as a lawyer, the housing issue is a very important thing that we have to address, and we have to look at it not only for the local perspective, but of the international perspective too. So
see, how does this work? It's very cute. So my name is Paula Siegel. I'm also a lawyer. I'm an attorney working in New York, and I work at Take Root Justice. We actually recently screened Push, which the film that Leilani made with communities that we work with here in New York. So we are an organization that provides legal and policy support to grassroots movement organizations in New York City. And myself particularly, I'm a land use lawyer working in our equitable neighborhoods practice. And among my practice is actually helping community land trusts in New York City that are being incubated in every neighborhood of the city as a response, it's a tenant-driven response to speculation and to displacement and involuntary moves that people are being forced to make in the city, but also as a response to the disinvestment that we saw in many, many neighborhoods throughout the 20th century in New York City, and as a way of taking back neighborhoods that were meant to die. Our practice extends to other community-controlled aspects of the city. We're really focused on New York City, and we also work with commercial tenants, with small businesses, with residents of public housing. We work with, other New Yorkers who are trying to take space in the city and take it out of the market and make a place for their communities. And we put the tools of land use law in the hands of those people. So we've been thinking a lot together with our clients of how to respond to a fiscalized landscape and to housing that is becoming more and more unaffordable and more empty, more and more unlived in. In that thinking, we have a rich history in New York. We're not doing this on a clean slate. I personally live in a rent-stabilized apartment in a 100-year-old walk-up building. There are about 1 million apartments in New York City that are actually rent-stabilized. They're regulated. You have a right to the renewal of your lease as a tenant. You cannot be evicted as long as you pay your rent. And we are actually actively fighting for a good cause eviction bill that would extend that right beyond the apartments that were put into the program in the 1970s. I'll stop there and pass it back.
Your mic is off, Felician.
Thank you. My name is Felician from Tanzania, and I have worked on teaching mostly in the subject real estate, housing, land administration, and now I'm a retired loan and now run a private firm, Majengo Estates, and we are dealing with a number of things. But my recent experience has been working on research for Habitat for International, Habitat for Humanity, Habitat for Humanity International, and they have a project that's in order to set up to scale up their work in Tanzania, but also with the government in terms of housing. We have it's very serious problem of informality. I think it's the same with some of the other countries in the global south. There's a lot of informal housing, and they have a lot of problems. And while we are working on the making easier access to to land for housing, we are always bogged down by even awareness, education. So we've run a mortgage literacy campaign. We did some research on gauging the awareness, the mortgage the literacy awareness of the people. Because once you've done with giving them the land titles, then The next thing is to use that land, to use this to access some credits so that they can do other things with the money. But that one is we're very, very, very far below. We have not done much as a country. In terms of there's a serious problem of housing. A lot of people that live in informal areas, they actually sharing very little space in terms of rental housings, room latings. Get a room which is a 3 times 4 or 9 feet by 12 feet, and that's for you and your family, and that's not very healthy. So we are working on ways of assisting people to access funds to be able to develop the land, to be able to. Getting land is not a serious problem as it is in other countries. We are still very rural. 70% of our people are living in the rural areas. So the few areas that are in town, then those are the ones that we are actually working on to get them going. I don't know whether I should go on, but in short, I've done some work on for the government setting up an information center for housing, because I think it's very important that the information is there to be able to tell what are the real concern in the housing sector. Is we have the prices are known, the rents are known, but we also we know where to get the cost information, to get which materials are necessary and the procedures. So we're setting up that one. Unfortunately, the proposal for setting up an information center for housing has not materialized yet. Still within the government is working on that one. I know there's something called white paper. So I think I will stop there.
Just to warm up the session and try to make it like a optimist session, we know that fighting against displacement in this capitalist society is really hard and difficult. But I would like to ask you, what are your achievements? What are you most proud of? Like, what when you are very old, like 90 years old, what will you be telling your grandchildren? Like, okay, life is difficult. I had many defeats, but here I got it. I'm very proud that I could achieve these and these and these. So this is the first like warm up session, and then I hope I don't facilitate anymore because then discussion will be very hot.
Well, I guess in my case, I'm very, very proud of being of help to these 7 very, very poor communities to develop their community land trust. Firstly, because it was the first one, the first community land trust in Puerto Rico. They did not know anything about community land trust, but they can feel that this model of collective land tenure will help them to stay put in the land that they helped to create it. When they started living there, most of it was wetland, and they managed to create land because by that time the government of Puerto Rico thought that these wetlands were the cause of many sickness and malaria, that the malaria mosquito grows there. So these communities did what what it was accustomed at that time. So they really created the land, and they built the houses there, and they worked together because, as the story goes, during the day the police came and tear down the houses, the shacks that they have built, and they get together during the night and they build back the houses. So by the time, they strong as a very united community, even though they are 7, really they are 8, but within the community land trust there are 7. They still strong, they'll still creating, for us as professors at the university, specifically at the School of Law, dealing with these very poor communities, saying, you know what, there's another thing other than the individual property. And this thing that we don't really know how do that works, we really know that it can help us to avoid displacement. It can help us to rehabilitate our space, and it can help us also to recover it's a channel that Caño Martí Peña comes from the name of a channel that goes around the communities. These community land trusts will help them also to rescue that channel that is very, very contaminated. In fact, recently, this is a project of the Corps of Engineers of the United States, because it's it's about water. It's considered waters of the United States, and they already assigned most of the money needed for the dredging of the channel and the rehabilitation, the eco rehabilitation. And it is important to know that once those rehabilitation projects have taken place, I think that there was in the mind of everybody, automatically this community would be displaced, because the place that it's already a good place, well located, and has all the attributes that we need for a good place to live, they have it. But the community land trust model will help them to stay put, not to be displaced, and to pave the way for the rehabilitation of the whole area. So I'm proud of being part of that, and that I was there putting my little piece of thing of work for them.
I think this is such a lovely question, and thank you, Renato, for posing it. I would say I'm pretty hard on myself and my work and what I have achieved and not achieved. And when you work at the international level, there's a slipperiness to, have I actually helped anyone? Have I done anything of relevance? Because you're connecting with people at the local level, and you're trying to support people at the local level by providing, an understanding of what the human right to housing means and what different governments have committed to, but you're not the doer at the local level. And it would be wrong to be the doer. So it's complicated for me when I think about, what have I achieved? What has my organization achieved? What would I be proud of? I guess I will say this. I think over the last 8 years or so, the 6 years while I was rapporteur and the 2 years of the pandemic, I think I have contributed to a global conversation about the financialization of housing, and forced it upon the world as a conversation, that it shouldn't be just a given like it was back in 2012 when some of the big financial actors really moved in on the scene and people were just like letting it happen. Don't get me wrong, governments continued, and Maria and Paula and Felicien are living that reality. I am here in Canada too. I'm watching as the big financial actors walk in. It's like ants. I always say like ants on a picnic. They're like, we're all drinking, well, not we, but the governments, they're drinking their champagne and their wine, and they're looking at the sea, and the ants are coming in and they're taking all the properties, and those ants are the big financial actors. It's actually not quite like that, because the people sipping their champagne are actually inviting the ants in, supporting them, providing the nice food, providing the nice blanket. In any event, I guess if I could say that I was proud of something, I do think I have helped to foster that conversation, to foster a critical lens on that conversation, and not just a critical lens, but a human rights lens, to say very, I think it's now, people like this line that I was beating like a drum, housing is a right, not a commodity. Gold is a commodity, housing's not. Those lines, I think, helped people understand, okay, we need to go back to values where housing is concerned, social values. And that's why I love the work that Maria was talking about, and I'm hoping Paula might talk about it too. The land trust work, I'm going to be honest with you. I think we're supposed to be in conversation, so I'm going to be in conversation with you. When I first heard about land trust, I was like, nice, but not scalable. And I really am changing my opinion. And I've encountered a few land trust projects that have helped me, and Maria's comments really helped me understand how significant, even if it's 8 families, those families in another world would have been written off, displaced. They're on prime land. Forget it, right? And that land trust gave them that claim that, for me, it's a human rights claim. So really interested to hear more about your experience as a land trust, but not to force a conversation, only to say, when I think now about returning to understanding housing as having social value, I look at things like land trust, because it just shows it's such a social values based model. I'll end there. There we go.
All right. Well, I got called on. I wasn't quite ready to, to decide what I was going to talk about, but you gave me a topic, so I will start. No, actually, I'm going to start somewhere else. I'm going to start actually with, I think, what I'm really proudest of. For about 7 years, starting 10 years ago, I started a project that helped folks see the scars of urban renewal and see the vacant public land in our neighborhoods, see that a lot of the disinvestment in our neighborhoods in New York is actually disinvestment by the city, right? It's not speculators, it's not third parties, it's the city waiting for neighborhoods to have whiter people in them so that they can lure development into those neighborhoods. And it was a project that was really focused on the fact that for about 10 years before that, the city had kind of shut down the creation of community gardens in New York and shut down the creation of any kind of social space that was anything other than a mall. We had 12 years of Bloomberg, and Bloomberg wanted the city to be a mall, and that is not what New Yorkers need. That is not what societies or communities need. And so we actually, one of our big strategies was actually just putting signs on vacant government-owned properties and helping people navigate through a process of creating community-managed open spaces in those spaces by actually forcing the government to do its job. At the end of those 5 years, we actually got the Parks Department of the City of New York to hire 5 people full-time to do what our organization with 1.5 people had been doing for 5 years, and actually help people activate spaces and help them move through that process. So those 5 hires, that's something I'm very proud of. But also an outcome of that project was so much leadership that would have not had access or not have an understanding necessarily of how exactly government policy were impacting their block. Young people seeing these signs, being able to maybe create a garden or maybe not create a garden, maybe fail, right? But actually understand what was standing in their way. And several of the people who worked with us then are now in elected office. They're leaders in their own organizations. They're really powerful voices in New York City advocacy now 10 years later. And that is what I think I'm proudest of. An offshoot of that work was starting to work really closely with an organization here in New York called Picture the Homeless. Also around the same time, they were looking at government-owned buildings that had gone through the same process. The city had acquired thousands of properties through both planned shrinkage, urban renewal and acquisition, and tax delinquency, tax and water bill delinquency to the city, and really had no plan. So some of that turned into vacant lots, mostly in the outer boroughs. Some of that were buildings that actually had people in them, tenants who had rights under our rent stabilization law, whose landlords had been completely absentee, who had eventually lost those buildings, but the tenants remained. And so Picture the Homeless, which is an organization that was led by people who were either homeless or formerly homeless, started actually organizing the people in those city-owned buildings who had become tenants of the city, and using similar methodologies, but also a lot of conversations. There's a big difference between someone's home and a vacant lot collecting trash. The conversations connected, and we were all part of starting a initiative that's called the New York City Community Land Initiative that has actually been supporting the development of community land trusts in New York. And now, 10 years later, I'm actually an attorney for a community land trust in East Harlem, in Manhattan, that was started by the power of organized homeless and formerly homeless people, talking to people who were living in buildings owned by the city of New York because they'd gone through a tax foreclosure in the 1970s. And 4 of those buildings are now in the community land trust. They're being renovated as we speak. All of the residents who are in those buildings will get to stay. They will have a leadership role in both the community land trust and in the organization that's been formed to actually own the buildings. And there are a number of new apartments that will be available, some of them at income levels that are much lower than anything that's available on the market in New York. And some of them not. It was a compromise in order to balance the books, to make the money work. Also, some of those units had to be priced quite high. So it's not an entirely rosy story, but I really see the connection between the work that we were doing 10 years ago, just opening up this conversation around what the city's doing with its property and who's in charge, and actually now really working closely with residents who are in charge.
Well, what am I proud of? I've not done much work on communities, but rather what I'm proud of is the fact that some of the research work that was commissioned by the government that I participated, I've seen some of them going through informing government on the government policy makers on what to do next. And the one that I can easily recall, there are 2 studies. One was on the real estate, optimizing real estate business, and we're looking at problems that developers. We have very limited new additional real estate coming up on the market, at least up to 2015. Before that, there was a serious problem because it was too expensive for developers to come up and develop. And one, because we are very strict, we inherited the British law. The British have already revised theirs, and we're still holding on the past laws, and therefore very rigid. So we want something that is more local, more practical, and we looked at a number of things in terms of how we can improve the development process, the ownership, and the disposal of real estate, which includes housing. So we came up with a number of proposals. This was the best practice studies that took us to India, Dubai, South Africa, and our friend Kenya. And some of these proposals have sailed through. And now we are expecting a new law, a bill. There's a draft bill on real estate, regulated real estate business activities, which I'm proud of. The other area that we dealt with was on rental housing. And this was a study that was not by the government, but it was by the Center for Affordable Housing Finance in Africa. And amazing information that we got. We sent teams of research assistants, and they came up with identified the different housing typology, the way people are fending for themselves in terms of housing, and we documented those. And we will soon see there's a publication coming out, but we'll see more efforts being directed towards realizing the people's efforts, self-help schemes, the way they use small land, and then they build a room with a small sitting room, a room with what we call like a ensuite washrooms, and so it's an incremental type of development. And if we can factor in these personal efforts, and then we can make it, we can facilitate in terms of at policy level, facilitate these people to the individuals to make up for their own housing. We also see an only problem that we have a very strict planning system, land use planning. So we segregate the people. We want people, those with high income, we give them large plot of land, and then we make a horizontal expansion of the city. As a result, we are not able to service these lands, and so we're now looking at. So we make suggestions on the need to go for a compact city, and if that happens, and the law has been passed we didn't have a condominium law, we call them unit titles, and that has happened. And we have another law that is, regulating the mortgage, the home loans arrangements, and together they seem to be working. And I see a lot of new innovations in terms of housing development, housing planning, and even management. And the fact that we had so we come from a socialism where the government was doing everything, and so people were less like laissez-faire. The government will work for us, but now we're seeing people struggling to get to get housing for themselves, and I think this is. I'm proud to see that things are happening, and of course with the help of many other people. I think I'll stop there. I'll do this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really inspiring to see people like you narrating your experience in the pride mode, because we are very used to use the denounce mode, and I personally prefer the pride mode because it gives much more soul to what we do. Although, unfortunately, I know we have to act much more often in the denounce mode than in the pride mode. I have another round of questions. Maybe if anyone wants to tell a story now that you all have positioned yourself as in the pride mode. What about telling a story in which you didn't win? I lost this, but I could have won. If only, if only I would have been quicker, or if only I had more resources, or I would have been cleverer, or someone was quicker or more clever than me. And I regret this. I always, when I try to sleep at the night, I always come back to that year in which, oh my God, if I just had said this and this and this in this public hearing, maybe more people would have not been displaced or have been in a better position. Do you recall some of these, I would say, winnable battles that unfortunately we have lost? I personally am very obsessive as a personality, and I always come back to these situations in which I could have done this little thing and result like the butterfly flying would have been very different. Do you remember any situations like this in your activities? Not like I lost to capitalism, because we lose to capitalism every day, but I lost to this specific agent that, and this sucks.
Well, I think that probably not in that way, but the thing that I most regret from me is that I have to learn to work with communities the hard way. You know, as a lawyer, we are trained to do. As a lawyer, we are trained to do the things, to say what is going to be happening, and all that. You know, it's the word of the lawyer. But during these 17 years of work with communities, I have learned the hard way that it's a slower process. It's not just like sitting on your desk and having a solution. You have to be patient. You have to be, you have to be to wait for the community pace, because you have to have the you know you have to understand that they need to understand you, and those a lot of words that you are saying to them, that they probably is the first time that they confront to that words, to that concepts, legal concepts. And most of the time, probably you want to be, quicker, and probably things are like you have a certain amount of time to do that. Like me, that I work with students at the clinical, what we are do, it's that we train the students to be sensible to communities and to learn to work with communities, and address the legal issues of the communities. But it's not what they say, it's what the community says. It's not your priorities, it's the community's priorities. So sometimes what I regret the most is that I have to have more, I need to be trained to understand that pace. So what I have done to probably, try to ameliorate the damage that I could do with my areas is that I started work with the social work school, the graduate social work school here at the University of Puerto Rico. And there's a professor that I invite her with me to the communities. And she is a social worker by train. Her students are training to be social workers, community social workers. So this is how I have, tried to fix this fault of mine. And also, I well, um, since the times has gone by, I have learned, and I have a little more understanding of that. But I would like to be more trained. Well, I read more. I read Pablo Freire, and I don't know. It's del opresor. I can't recall the name. Um, but which with the whole thing with this this way to understand the community is to help the people understand what you are doing in that, and it's twofold. You learn from them and they learn from you, so at the end of the time you have a citizen, you have a person that is more willing to participate, as Paula was saying. This person is more willing to take the leadership of their community, to propose if they want to speak and speak out and speak loud about their needs. And this is something that it's really, really fulfilling at the end. But when you start at the beginning, it's very difficult to comprehend that.
I was trying to disrupt the order a little bit, but anyway. So one of the things I was thinking was making me laugh was, you know, as an advocate, I often really go after the low-hanging fruit. So then I don't experience this lack of success. if you just go for that low-hanging fruit. So there is some truth to that. And I'm at a stage in my work life where I'm tired of doing what Renato said, the denouncing this, using a stick all the time. And I've started to allow actors to come to me. So whether it's civil society, a grassroots movement, or a government, I'm just waiting. I'm here. Come. And it's a totally different experience. So I have had governments come to me and say, hey, we hear you do this like human rights thing. What is this? Because whatever we're doing here isn't working. And maybe we should try something new. So those are my most positive interactions. Or when a grassroots group comes and says, we're tenants, we're organizing, but we need to know a little bit more. We saw this film Push. We need to know more about this right to housing. What is this? How can we use it? So just to say, I've been fortunate in the last couple of years, in particular, strategically going after low-hanging fruit and feeling confident enough that enough people will be interested in the work that they'll come to me. So I'm not having to constantly use this stick. It doesn't mean I don't use it, but less. But I do have a situation I was thinking about. It was probably the most difficult situation I encountered as UN rapporteur. When I was rapporteur, I had to go on country visits. So every year we tried to go on 2 country visits. You have to be invited in by the government to do so. And you really examine like what's happening on the ground, what's happening at the highest levels, and you write a report and you kind of, provide a template of recommendations for the implementation of the right to housing. So I was invited to Egypt. And I was the first UN rapporteur to have been invited to Egypt it was something like 8 or 10 years. And of course, when one is invited to Egypt, you, as a human rights person, if you know anything about Egypt, you think twice about going, yes? So I thought twice about going, and I talked with the UN team, and it was agreed that I should probably go, that this was an interesting opportunity. So I went to Egypt, and Egypt, when I got there, I realized that they had some misconceptions and misperceptions about me and about the human right to housing. So they had embarked on a large-scale build supply program that had merits. They wanted to build, it was one of these like political things. We're going to build 1 million units in 10 years or, like this. And it had some merit, I for sure. But I think they thought I was a young woman. I'm of Arab descent myself. They probably thought I'm younger than I am. And I think they believed housing is like a motherhood issue, like it's not like, I'm not there like, to examine torture from their perspective, right? I'm there to just like, look at housing, like nice, So I think they were surprised at how seriously I was taking the mission, that I wanted to go to, Suez and the conflict areas, et cetera, et cetera. The mission was abusive of me, and the administration was bullying. And I regret I stayed the whole mission. I did my, I did my end of mission report. I met with the media, et cetera. A lot of people's lives ended up being at risk because of my visit. And of course, we tried to prevent that from happening. But I was being followed by Egyptian security. And one of the main lawyers who was really assisting my mission, because you can't do a mission without people on the ground helping you. He ended up, a day or two after I left, he ended up fleeing to Washington, D.C., and is still resident there because he felt his life was being threatened. And you can only imagine how I wear that. Almost everyone I visited, and I wasn't able to visit a lot of people in their homes, was either harassed or detained by security forces after my visit. And I feel like I should have aborted that mission. I wear it heavy to this day, as you can imagine. I mean, as a human rights defender, to put other human rights defenders' lives at risk, it's unacceptable. And I do feel like the United Nations bears some responsibility that they didn't have my back on that mission. I kept calling. I was on the phone constantly every time, saying to them, this isn't I was detained on the side of the road by police, and like all sorts of horrible things were happening. And I kept saying, raising flags, like, this isn't cool, this isn't good. And no one was helping me to make a decision about aborting the mission. And I should have had the strength to go with my gut and just leave. So it was one of those calculations as a human rights defender, because the people on the ground really wanted me there as much as I might cause them some insecurity. They really wanted some truths to come out. So, I had the most moving meeting I've ever had in my entire work history with a group of LGBTQ. They were the only people who did not get harassed as a result of my meeting with them, because we did it so clandestinely, a bait and switch and moving rooms. And you can't even imagine how we made that happen. I was the decoy, so the security was with me. My team went and met with this group. I then later met with them. I mean, it was completely crazy. They entered and exited the hotel where we were meeting with them, all separately from different entrances. I mean, it was like out of a movie. I think that group would still feel like my having been there and having met with them was hugely important, because Egypt is in denial about those. They looked me in the eye, the officials, and said, we don't have gay people. We do not have gay people in Egypt. Like, what are you talking about? So anyway, that's a long story, but just to say, I wear that one really heavy, and I'm not sure that I will ever get over that. And that's probably a good thing. It probably helps in my future advocacy, my constant advocacy. So, yeah.
Thank you, Lilian. You super. From my point, where did I get? Was it a winnable battle that I lost? I think mine was inaction. I didn't do anything. I looked at it, and so I saw things happening, and poor me, I wasn't able to do anything. And this was to do with we are doing a lot of infrastructural development in the country, between the city of Dar es Salaam, and so the local, the national road agency, they wanted more land to expand the roads, and unfortunately, they needed to take land, so they displaced people. But in this case, there was a very political decision that considered the people had encroached on the land. It was not their land, which was highly debatable. And so they pulled down the houses without any compensation. And families were, like more than 3,000 people thrown out of the road. Their beautiful buildings, bulldozed down. And there we were, we looked at what is happening. There were individuals who came up and said, look, you guys, can you do something? So in some cases, we were able to go out and take measurement of the buildings as a record, just in case they might need, take a legal action and then perhaps get over the government. But you see, the government is very strong. They have if they decide, the politicians have decided, then there's very little that you can do. So we looked at it from our professional point of view. we looked at it. So it's not very right what is happening, but it's very important because we need the roads. But what about the rights of those individuals who own land? What are the rights? Or what do we do with the people who are tenants on the premises and they were to be thrown out? Where do they go and so on? So we looked at it like helplessly, but we couldn't help. So it was a battle, but it is the battle that we dare not to go into it. So we let it go. Today we have very beautiful roads, widened, and we are very happy. But the people that had properties there, they are still struggling. Some even like they were so shocked what was happening because the bulldozers would come at night, and so they had some fainted, some they are now living with their relatives, very poor in a very poor way. But it's a battle that we never fought. We never tried to fight. So in action, I think that's the way.
So I've been thinking about, it is capitalism, right? It's capitalism everywhere. But the thing I've been really thinking about is when I started 596 Acres, a lot of people wanted to make it about me. I got all these like special, you're a leader, you're a change maker, but it was never about me. It was, what I was doing was translating data into some visual, understandable context and having conversations with people. But I was also facilitating a lot of people having conversations with one another, right? As I said earlier, I think the biggest achievement of that project is that we got the government to create positions to do that work. That it never felt like it was about me, but it felt like it was completely possible to have my works kind of consumed behind this cult of personality. And it took me, I think, a little too long to recognize that. Maybe I don't know what too long means. I don't know what the time scale is. But it became, when I realized that it had happened, it had already happened. Right. Whenever it started, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. But that was how, like, no one wanted to understand this as a systemic issue. They wanted to be like, oh, this like young woman had a clever idea. And I played into that for some time, right? Like I'm an Ashoka fellow, right? I got recognition for that, even though it was very much not about me. So it is capitalism, right?
Thank you so much for sharing your um, narratives and also your nightmares sometimes, the things that the stories that you ever try to go back and which are really unsolved. And I'm sure if we perform them, we get closer to make peace with these stories that sometimes haunt us. The worst ones are the ones that we cannot narrate, being very Freudian here. We have still some minutes, and I just our hour of conversation, it went out very quickly. It was really a privilege to be with you. Uh, Such important people that got 1 hour of your time to share. This discussion will be available in the internet, in New King Co's, and also maybe Fika's YouTube channel. Before we say goodbye, I want to give you back the word so that you say goodbye and say whatever you want, and also warmly invite you to the next 10 further conversations of the Land Purpose Forum, which promise to be as exciting as this one. Thank you so much.
That disrupted the order. Thank you so much for this conversation. What a complete delight. I can tell you my mood, you can imagine, with 2 people in my house with COVID, one of them my son. although he's doing well. My mood coming here was a little bit heavy. You know, I'd rather crawl up in bed, and I was thinking, oh, I should just like drink tea and eat cookies and watch Netflix or something. Capitalism. So thank you so much, because my whole mind, my whole feeling of the day, about the day and about possibilities has changed. Like amazing. So in an hour that flew by. It's lovely to meet all of you. I really do hope that our worlds can interact and connect. I actually am supposed to go to both Puerto Rico and New York. So I will absolutely 100% for sure contact you if those trips ever happen. Puerto Rico's been put off. It's one of, I admit, Puerto Rico is one of the places I'm very interested in visiting, because I think I will learn so much just by being there. Tanzania is not yet on my agenda, unfortunately, but maybe. Thank you so much. That's all I want to say.
Thank you so much, Leilani. And I'm proud to say that when the community Lantros Atecaño communities won the Habitat Award, Leilani make such a wonderful comments about the community organization. So, and she stressed the role of the women. We haven't noticed that about that time, women are most of our community leaders. So when Leilani pointed out, we were just very proud. I said, yeah, she's right. Oh, yes. So Paula also, we have met before, Paula. So it's great to meet you again. And it's very, very, I'm pleased to know Felician. So I hope that we can keep in touch. And I put you on the chat, the reference to a book that we just published last year. I think it was 2020 in Spanish last year, about the whole movement of community lantros around the world. So it might be of your interest. And thank you very much. And I think this conversation has been wonderful. Thank you.
I'm so glad to reconnect, Maria. I had you come and speak to a group in New York, except that it was pre-COVID and you were on a screen and flat, and everybody thought it was so strange. But now here we are, and this actually seems quite easier. So it's really great to see you again. Renato, thank you so much for inviting me. Leilani, you're a hero. It's so great to meet you in person. And Felician, I feel like I have so much to learn, and I'm looking forward to learning more. So thank you all.
Thank you for having me on the program. Lillian, I'm sorry for all that we were going through. My prayers with you. Now, but you have to come to Tanzania. So thank you very much. And I'm glad that we've tackled this is a very important subject, as a matter of fact, affordable housing with displacement. And I hope you can also find time to join us in the section. I think it's tomorrow, on the financial modeling for land stewardship. Other than that, asante. Thank you.
Just to say thank you so much. It was really great. It's been a privilege to spend this hour. It felt like many hours, and I hope we are still together in the next future, and in the near future in the Land Purpose Forum conversations on government, off-grid, sustainability, community building, blockchain, any possible subject related to land, and how can we make land a more just and decommodified thing in the present and in the future. Thank you so much.